In just the last 24 hours, the Middle East has been pushed right to the edge of an all-out war. So today, we're going to break down exactly what happened, how it is already sending shockwaves through the global economy, and what this could all mean for the future. Let's get right into it.
It all kicked off with a truly stunning military strike that basically decapitated Iran's entire leadership. The payback was swift, it was widespread, and it didn't just target military bases, but major civilian centers. This has set off a crazy chain reaction, and the question on absolutely everyone's mind is, what on earth happens now?
Okay, to really get a handle on this, we're going to walk through 5 key areas. First, we'll look at the flashpoint itself, the event that started it all. Then, we'll see how the entire region got engulfed in the retaliation. After that, we'll zoom out and look at the global economic shockwaves, analyze the high-stakes political chess match being played, and finally, try to make sense of the deeply uncertain future we're all facing.
So let's start at the very beginning, at the epicenter, the joint U.S.-Israeli military operation that lit the fuse on this whole thing.
Things escalated incredibly fast. It began with that joint strike on key Iranian targets. Then, in a really unusual move, President Donald Trump himself confirmed the strike, hours before Iran even officially acknowledged it. And the casualties? They were just staggering. The supreme leader, the head of the army, and the defense minister, all taken out in a single blow.
Now this is where it gets really murky. You've got 2 completely conflicting stories. The official U.S. line from Trump was that this was to stop Iran's nuclear program and missile threats. But then you have this Omani mediator, who was in the middle of talks right before the strike, saying a peace deal was within reach and Iran had already agreed to never stockpile enriched uranium. These 2 narratives just don't add up, and that gap is right at the heart of this crisis. While that strike led to an immediate and frankly a ferocious response from Iran, one that dragged the entire region right into the middle of the conflict.
Yeah, this was not just some targeted counterattack, it was an unprecedented wave of retaliation. Iran launched missiles and drones at Israel, sure, but also at a whole bunch of Gulf states that host U.S. military bases. In an instant, this ballooned from a standoff between a few countries into a full-blown region-wide crisis.
And this quote, it just perfectly captures the psychological shock. For years, Dubai has built this image as a totally safe, stable bubble for business and tourism, an oasis of security in a really volatile part of the world. Well, that bubble has just been pierced, and that feeling of safety has been fundamentally shaken.
And we're not talking about hits on some remote desert bases. We're talking about direct impacts on major civilian infrastructure. Blasts were reported at Dubai International, the world's busiest airport, and at luxury hotels on the Palm Jumeirah. This brought the war right into the daily lives of civilians and expats in a terrifying way.
And you can bet the fallout didn't stop at the region's borders. The consequences for the global economy were immediate, and they were severe.
20%. Just let that number sink in. That's how much of the world's oil passes through one single narrow choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. And in response to the attack, Iran's Revolutionary Guard shut it down completely.
This, of course, set off a devastating chain reaction. You close the strait, you sever a vital artery of global energy. The supply is instantly disrupted, and the markets, they react exactly how you'd think they would. Crude oil prices were on a path to spike dramatically everywhere.
At the very same time, global travel was thrown into absolute chaos. See, Dubai isn't just another airport. It's the busiest transit hub on the entire planet. When it gets disrupted, it creates this massive ripple effect. Major airlines started grounding flights, passengers were stranded, and it caused delays and cancellations on a truly global scale.
So beyond the economic hit, this crisis has forced nations all around the world into some incredibly difficult, high-stakes diplomatic corners.
Let's just look at the core dilemmas for 2 key players here. For the U.S. under Trump, the goal seems to be regime change, which is a direct contradiction of his own campaign promises. Meanwhile, you have a country like India, which is facing this immense challenge of trying to protect its millions of citizens in the Gulf, while also balancing its strategic ties with both Iran and the U.S. and its allies.
This is the perfect definition for what India is dealing with. I mean, on one hand, it relies on this strategic port in Iran, Chabahar, to get around Pakistan and access Central Asia. But on the other hand, its relationships with the U.S. and the Gulf countries are absolutely vital. It has to walk this line perfectly to avoid disaster.
And for Donald Trump, this is a massive political gamble. He built a huge part of his platform on getting America out of these endless regime change wars. He blamed past presidents for getting the U.S. tangled up in them. And now, his own actions are pushing the country right toward the exact kind of conflict his base voted to avoid.
So, where does all this leave us? The honest reality is we're in a super precarious standoff, and there are no easy off-ramps in sight.
You know, if the U.S. goal here was to trigger a total regime collapse, they may have seriously miscalculated. Turns out Iran has a well-established plan for this exact scenario. An interim leader was chosen almost immediately, and the process to elect a new supreme leader is already underway. That suggests the government is going to hold together.
And yet the rhetoric just keeps escalating. This threat from Donald Trump, it leaves absolutely zero room for backing down. It basically signals a readiness to just keep climbing the ladder of conflict, no matter what the cost.
And that brings us to the final and frankly, chilling question. You have an Iran that has declared avenging its leader a sacred duty. You have a U.S. president threatening unprecedented force. And you have mediators saying that any chance for dialogue is visibly off the table. In a high-stakes game of chicken like this, who blinks first? The answer to that is going to determine the fate of the region and quite possibly the world.